I have a question about mentors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer in mentors, either mentors that know us and we know them, or people that we assign as mentors without them realizing it, this sort of thing. Do you have mentors at this stage of life for particular areas of life? Or are you mentoring yourself? Are you flying with a few voices in your head that serve you well? Who are your mentors?
I definitely have people I consider mentors. I think at this point, rarely one way, in the sense that they tend to be friends I spend time with. They get something from it. I get something from it. Not in a transactional way, but they find it fun or beneficial or amusing, in some way redeeming, to spend time with me. That's the hope.
But how is that different from like traditional friendship, just sort of standard friendship? Are you are you spending time with some orientation toward like they're embodying areas of life that you would like to emulate?
Totally. I mean, I spend time around people I hope to be more like in some way. Because guess what? You're going to average into, say, the sum holistic whole of the 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with. So you should choose that very carefully. That includes virtual parasocial relationships. It's like, okay, if you're listening to fill in the blank person for 4 hours a week, 5 hours a week, 2 hours a week, whoever that group is comprised of is going to influence who you become. And for me, then I think carefully about my friendships, and they could be older, like Kevin Kelly, who's become a good friend, who has a wealth of life experience that I don't have. And so I might just call him and say, Kevin, I have a question for you. But I do that with my younger friends too. And they could be younger than I am, and I might still view them as a mentor in X, Y, or Z. I think mentor has a heavy weight to it. It has a connotation of maybe never-ending, time-consuming obligation. So I would never, for instance, and I know a lot of people try this, ask someone to be my mentor. It's like, would you like to be my free life coach forever? It's like, that's kind of how it sounds to the recipient.
Right. So it sounds very formal.
Yeah, it sounds very formal.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say there have certainly been mentors. I've had wrestling coaches. I've had teachers. I've had resident advisors who are reverends who had a huge impact on my life and followed up with me and paid attention to me and cared for me in more of a one-directional sense, right? I view myself as the beneficiary. Of course, they certainly got something out of it if they had that job. I mean, they probably found it to be very gratifying in its own way. And teachers like Professor Ed Shao at Princeton, I feel incredibly indebted to. These days, and for a long time, I've believed that you can learn something powerful from almost anyone, probably anyone you interact with. Could be an Uber driver, could be someone taking garbage out of a restaurant. If you really take the time to dig, you can find something. And before you can, I think as an adult, effectively think about who you would like to learn from, if I put it that way, it's helpful to have a baseline of self-awareness that you know what you might want to work on to either amplify strengths, develop skills, address weaknesses. And so, for instance, one of my close friends, Matt Mullenweg, is younger than I am. He's the founder of Automattic, which runs WordPress.com. He was the lead developer of WordPress, although it was an open source project, of course, with many, many contributors. He was one of the lead developers, now powers something like 32% of the internet. And he exemplifies a cool and calm temperament, even in the most chaotic periods imaginable, during the most chaotic events imaginable. And when I find myself getting dysregulated, to use a fancy term, losing my shit, or getting carried away by emotion, getting righteously angry, or whatever it might be, and I recognize at some point that it's really not serving me, that I am being owned by the emotion, right? Like I'm the dog on the leash, not the other way around. Then I think of Matt. I'm like, what would Matt do? what advice would Matt give me right now? How would Matt act in these circumstances? And I do that with many friends. I also think a lot about, and this is borrowing from someone named Kathy Sierra from a long time ago, focusing more on just-in-time information as opposed to just-in-case information. So just-in-case information is like, I'm going to read these 20 books because in 2 years I might be interested in X, Y, and Z. That, I think, is often a waste of time because if it ever becomes relevant, you're just going to have to reread those books. People do the same thing with humans. They're like, I want to meet so-and-so and have them as my mentor because maybe 5 years from now, I'll do X, Y, and Z, and then they'll be useful for ABC. That's too speculative. And I think it ends up in a lot of wasted energy. So the podcast for me, writing the books and doing the interviews, even prior to the podcast, becoming involved with startups, delving into the world of science and scientists, all helps me to develop a confidence that almost any question I could ask, I can find some semblance of an answer for by just reaching out to a few people and saying, who do you know who might be able to answer this? And that's very reassuring, and it relieves some of the anxiety or pressure that people might feel to assemble some personal board of directors of like X-men and women who can help them with everything. And then there are people I hire to be accountable to, right? So I might work with coaches, therapists, and so on, who I would view as mentors. They just happen to be getting paid for it.
Right.